Hello and welcome. This is Paul Palms. I'm going to be talking today about time management. The subtitle is probably a bit of a stretch for some. Calling time management the ultimate auditor's challenge, that could be a stretch for some, but at the end of the day, it is your ultimate challenge when you recognize that it's kind of all going in the wrong direction and you have far too much to do and not enough time to get there. And anyone who's done any auditing knows exactly what I'm talking about. Whether you're a first, second, or third-party auditor, managing time is a big issue. What I'm trying to do is to help us to see this in perhaps a little bit of a different light, so that it is more of a part of the audit, perhaps, than it has been in the past. A little bit about me. I've been in this if you call it profession, for almost 30 years now. The first registration was to the 1987 edition, back in the early 90s. So I'm currently the chair of Subcommittee 1 of ISO TC 176. That's the international committee responsible for the ISO 9001 series of documents. Subcommittee 1 is, its obligations are to try to be sure that we revise and amend anything having to do with ISO 9000. That document is quality management fundamentals, concepts, but for most everybody, terminology. That's the big one for ISO 9000. That's its greatest contribution. It is also normative, meaning it is a must if you're going to embark in use of ISO 9001 or register to the aerospace standard, AS 9100, or TS 16949. Well, okay, it's now 16949, the automotive standard. It is normative to all of those and cited by many, many management standards. So I'm also past chair of the United States Technical Advisory Group to TC 176. Current chair is Alan Daniels, and he started his term just earlier this year. I would like to point out that every country has a mirror committee. That's what we call it in the standards world. The US TAG is one of over 40 plus mirror committees. If you have any interest in standards writing, contributing to the body of knowledge through standards revisions, help us out. Join your country's equivalent to the US tag to TC 176. I think all you probably need to do is to type in mirror committee and then your country name, and you'll get, I'm sure you'll get contact information for how you can join. We're all volunteers, and we need help. We need all of the experts we can in the world to help us write better standards. I've written 4 books. The first was on using PDCA in auditing and auditing practices, and one on teamwork, and the ISO 9001 2015 handbook with Prentice Hall. So if you're interested in learning further about auditing and or standards, there you go. We're talking today, of course, about time management. You know, it's interesting how much time we put in pre-planning that audit process. You know, we're looking at these three primary tick marks here: complexity of the process. Obviously, warehouse operations are typically less complex than the purchasing operation that brought those goods and supplies in. Not to say that some warehouses aren't extremely complex, but some are more complex than others. So a very highly complex process is going to take a lot longer than a less complex. If there are less requirements, same thing. And if you have run into problems, say, on your last audit of a particular process in your organization, it would be obvious that you're going to spend a little time going over past nonconformance and determine whether or not everything is working as it should. And after a while, you're also going to get to know your auditee. So there could be communication issues. The attitude of your auditee sometimes can be an issue if you've been at it for a while. and especially in internal auditors, you have to recognize that you're dealing with different people throughout the day. That could have a bearing on how much time you need to plan for your audit. Interruptions, I remember as a third-party auditor, that every time I visited a particular gentleman in the sales department, I could count on at least 3 interruptions for every half hour. I added 10 minutes to the audit plan at the second year and kept it that way. But you know, everybody thinks this way. Everybody who's in the auditing profession, and no matter what the audit subject, has to deal with these complexities. And of course, I think as I mentioned at the first slide, these issues are universal. Every one of us have experienced difficulty in managing these issues. We're only allotting a certain amount of time based on some expectations, it's a little bit of guesswork, especially if it's the first time you're going into an organization or a particular department. And we still have to try to keep the time. We have to be sure to get there on time and to leave on time. Well, here's the unfortunate truth, right? The first rule is time can't be managed. It's on its own. It will continue to do what it does. But boy, the only thing we can do is monitor it. You know, and given that your audit plan is, as I mentioned here, pretty much an informed estimate, it's just like anything in war. You know, the plan is the first thing to go south. It's how you recover from it. You know, you have to make modifications on the fly. You have to deal with the unknown. But at the end of the day, we should be always referring to the process requirements. You know, I know that there are going to be changes, switchbacks, unforeseen issues, but at the end of the day, we're linked to the requirements of the standard. You know, as second-party auditors, product requirements are really what we're looking at more than anything. So if things start to go south, if planning proves to be a little inadequate, the most important thing is that we're sure that we're managing or examining the specific requirements of whatever standard we're auditing against. You know, as I put in here, there's a finite number of processes that are to be examined during a given time frame. That should be clear. And within that, there are a finite number of requirements. And as long as we try to keep focus on that and not go off into, well, other subjects, the better we're going to be. You know that, but you also know that that's going to happen. So do you include extra time in your audit plan? It's very basic, isn't it? I mean, with all, the best laid plans of mice and men often go astray, I've heard, right? Very common saying. But if we add a little bit extra time, we are anticipating the unknown. So if you say you're going to be at in a particular area for a half an hour, make it 45 minutes. But that gives you an extra 15 minutes, say in the morning, and in the afternoon. If you have another half-hour block, add 15 minutes there, so that you have a half an hour within your day where you can compensate or make compensation. Think about just, I'll put it this way, padding your audit plan. I've found that just adding 10 minutes in the morning or 10 minutes in the afternoon can be really valuable to give you a little bit of extra time if I need to spend some extra time in an area that I didn't think I would. The second rule is that you got to be reasonable. You know, for third-party audits, for third-party auditors, we visit the client 3 times, once a year, over a 3-year period, right? So it's not necessary to audit every single process in every single visit. I mean, every visit you make is not a registration audit. They're called surveillance audits. So during the surveillance audits, those 2 surveillance audits, we don't have to audit every single process. Keep that in mind. Yes, there are some processes that must be audited, that are specific to the requirements of your standard. We're not talking about those. Yes, we have to visit those areas every single time we go, but you may not have to go to the warehouse, for example, on all of your visits, and other areas may be the same. So think about that. Several processes can be examined less frequently. For your second-party auditors, there's more time, or you should be devoting more time to product issues, right? If you spend a lot of time talking about your management review was 1 month late, and you're really there to make sure that your products are delivered on time with 100% plug and play, right? Well, let's spend a little less time talking about the mechanics of quality and start talking about the output of quality, because it's the output that matters. So keep the eye on the prize. Let's put it that way. And for third-party auditors, use Stephen Covey's "begin with the end in mind." Have very well-defined objectives. If you go in, you have to see, let's say you go into purchasing, and within your organization, it's pretty much become standard practice to ask to see 3 purchase orders just to determine whether or not that all of those areas are complete, if they're doing a proper job of defining requirements and so forth. That's the number one thing. Spend less time talking about things that are interesting, but not necessarily requirements. Dennis Arter said, "We audit the present to determine the future." I loved that phrase. Dennis Arter no longer practices, but he's alive and well. He's written several wonderful books on auditing. But the concept is, if I go to purchasing and I find that they're doing a really good job, that present moment tells me that if they maintain what they're doing, they should be doing the same thing tomorrow, the next day, the day after that. We audit the present to determine the future. So audit the present in the present. Stick to the requirements, stick to what needs to be in compliance. Do you include transportation time in your audit plan? I had an email literally today from an auditor. She said that, and she's in aerospace, so there's some pretty big buildings, that you visit during those audits. She said that she had a 3.5-mile walk from one part of the plant to the other during her audit day. 3.5 miles. There were apparently there were no golf carts available. But it's an issue. When you're doing your planning, it's an issue to think about whether or not you have transportation time in your audit plan. Okay. Rule 3, there's no such thing as people management. All these wonderful oddities that we're talking about, if you heard the phrase, it's like herding cats. You're of a particular personality type, and it would be really nice if everyone you met was the same personality type, but it's never going to happen. All the planning that you do and all of the experience you might have as a seasoned auditor can never prepare you for the different types of folks you're going to meet along the way. Auditees are of infinite variety, just as auditors are. But we need to quantify, codify, lock down time in order for everyone, regardless of attitude or personality type, to recognize that keeping time is just as important as being compliant. So started at the opening meeting. We're going to review the audit plan in morning and afternoon blocks and agree on our schedule, our start and end times as just as important as the processes that we're visiting. As you're going through each visit, say you're going to visit 3 different processes in the morning, maybe 4. In the margin over on the side, write down who you're going to visit with and perhaps where. Building Frank Smith, Building 6. The next is Joe Black, and that's in Building 2. That sort of thing. Agree on any modifications, any revisions within the audit plan during that meeting, that opening meeting, and then have them reprint the schedule for all the participants. And you're saying that it's really, really important that we recognize that the auditor is making clear he or she is going to be at these places and start and end at these times. It's being professional about it, okay? And then, of course, as I mentioned, implement as agreed. Don't vary from it. You know, for most of my auditing career, I thought of audits as blocks of time, but I didn't really connect it as well as I should to the amount of time and whether or not I was going to really live up to the allotted time. That, you know, I could always get by, I could always make it work. And it wasn't until one of my auditees mentioned to me that my loose style was difficult on the organization. That, you know, they were really a group of people who expected punctuality and timeliness, and that sunk in. We need to be mindful of setting these parameters, these times, and then making sure that we live up to them. Again, just as important as the subjects that we're auditing. And at the end of the day, of course, as I've said 5 times, these plans are just a starting point. But here's something that I found that worked. If you go into your first block of time, you know, you're introduced to your auditee, your guide is there with you. Now, if you're a first party or an internal auditor, maybe it's the note taker that's going to help with this. But what we're trying to do is establish a time monitor and some, you know, agreed upon method, so that perhaps at the halfway point, the time monitor would say, you know, we've only got 10 minutes left. No, we've only got a half an hour left. And then maybe we've only got 5 minutes left. But figure out what those intervals are and assign someone to help everyone stay on time. The 2 little tick marks, you know, this promotes a business setting, and it could be a positive. It shows that we're trying to be professional about this, and there's this expectation of being efficient, okay? And it's really important to be aware of what the critical few is within your audit. You know, okay, at the end of the day, you're really looking for several discrete and distinct things that are in compliance, okay? Keeping mind of those critical few is what can help you to shift gears. So they say, well, you only have a half of the audit time remaining. That's the time to start saying, do I have enough time to examine those critical things that I need to see? The documentation that they said they had, the records that you know they have to have because the standard requires it. And if it's allowed, you could also save time by asking that copies of certain documents or whatever be emailed to you, or perhaps emailed to the guide, so that the guide could then give you those copies so that you can make notes from them and not have to spend time during the audit doing that. You could do it at another time, during some downtime, maybe before or after the audit. But then, of course, give those papers back to the guide before you leave. So think at the end of the day, though, that there are certain critical issues that have to be examined during your audit. Have you ever opened your door on a beautiful, let's call this, let's set it up as a lovely Sunday morning, and you open your back door and you have some grass there. Or maybe you're taking a walk or running on a lovely day in the morning, and you see a rabbit. They're amazing, aren't they? They just stand there and they look at you. They might stop chewing on the grass, but they just stare at you and they say, I'm really not here. I'm hiding, but I'm hiding in plain sight, and I'm not here. During your audit, you see rabbits all the time. You know, like underneath the table on a little shelf in manufacturing, you see 10 parts there. They're just sitting there. And you come to find out that those 10 parts were from a run that was done like 2 weeks ago. And oh, we were going to put it in as scrap, but we didn't get around to it, and so on. It's just like a rabbit. It's hiding in plain sight. And so many things, nonconformance issues are right there. They're in plain sight, and you've got your things that you want to talk about during your audit, those critical few that you're looking into. But wow, here's this issue that you face. And the other thing is, a lot of the times these nonconformities become ingrained within the organization. They don't, okay, well, so what? There's 10 parts there. This happens all the time. And it's not good, right? You know that. But here you are looking at what essentially is, not best of class performance, and you want to investigate it. And as you should. Well, you better set a reasonable time limit. Because when we say we run down a rabbit hole or chase the rabbit trail, it can lead you into many areas that you had no idea that you were going to visit. So if you're going to chase down a rabbit trail, probably alert all your downstream processes through your guide or through whoever is helping you during the audit, or if you have to yourself, and tell them the schedule is going to be updated because you got to look into this. Perhaps you just make note of it, and then at the end of the day, spend a little extra time going over whatever you found. Rabbit trails are, the #1 threat to an audit. Internal auditors, they're great subjects for follow-up audits. If you find something that's really not as it should be, instead of completely moving away from the scope of your audit, make that a suggestion for next audit. That's a great thing to do. And then follow the rabbit trail as its own subject matter for the next audit. In second-party auditors, boy, that's weird when you find a rabbit trail. Most of the time, your suppliers are only dealing with the good stuff. They're doing their best to make themselves look their best. As a supplier to many organizations, we did our best to try to make everything look right. But if you do find something that's off when you're doing a second party or a product audit, it is an opportunity for both sides to learn and grow. Treat it as an opportunity and not something that you're going to get upset about or anything like that. But again, you can't make it the entire day running down that audit trail. So nonconformance that becomes chronic is not normal, and it's not okay. And people who say no harm, no foul, it's only because you haven't fouled yet, and there isn't any harm yet. But there is a right way, and it's our obligation to point it out to our auditees. It's just that we can't have it hijack our audit. So take time to make time important. That's the bottom line. You have to take time to make time important. This begins at the initial acceptance of your audit plan, and it goes all the way to the closing meeting. We should end on time with a thank you, just as the minute hand reaches 12. No, you don't have to be that. That's specific. But you got to keep time throughout the audit. The time monitor is something that I found worked pretty well. And choose your audit subjects rationally. Third-party auditors don't overload the plan. Recognize that you're going to visit, 3 times within the triennial, and make a surveillance and not another rehash of a registration audit. And those rabbits, be careful. They're cute, but they can take you off into subjects that you never thought you'd be talking about. They're important, but manage them carefully. At the end of the day, this is your call, but try to do it on time, okay? Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure meeting with you today. Take care.